The gunshot that echoed through the streets of Angels Camp, California, that scorching afternoon in July 1878 was not meant to kill, but it changed everything nonetheless. Gideon Nash had been watering his horse outside the general store when he heard preacher Silas Thornton's voice rise above the dusty street noise, sharp and condemning as a whip crack. The words that followed made every person within earshot freeze in their tracks, conversations dying mid-sentence as if someone had just announced the second coming. "You are a woman of sin and corruption," the preacher declared, his face red beneath his black hat. "This town has no place for the likes of you. You will not darken the doorway of any God-fearing establishment in Angels Camp, and if I have anything to say about it, you will be on the next stage out of here." Gideon turned, his hand still gripping the water bucket, and saw her. The woman stood alone in front of the church, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders, her dress dusty from travel. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, and her face, though streaked with tears, held a dignity that made his chest tighten. She did not cower before the preacher's wrath. Instead, she stood straight, her chin lifted, though her hands trembled at her sides. "I have done nothing wrong," she said, her voice carrying across the street despite its softness. "I came here looking for help, for sanctuary." "Is that not what a church is supposed to provide? Not to women like you," Preacher Thornton spat. "Not to those who have lain with men outside the bonds of holy matrimony. Your condition is evidence enough of your sin." It was then that Gideon noticed the slight swell of her belly beneath her dress. Pregnant, alone, and now being cast out by the one man who should have offered her compassion. The crowd that had gathered murmured amongst themselves, some nodding in agreement with the preacher, others looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. That was how it always went in small towns like this. People were quick to judge and slow to help when helping might cost them their own reputation. Gideon set down the bucket. He had lived alone on his ranch 5 miles outside of town for the better part of 3 years, ever since his parents had died of fever. At 28, he had grown accustomed to solitude, to the quiet rhythm of cattle and horses and the vast California sky. He had learned to live with loneliness like a man learns to live with an old injury. But watching this woman stand alone against the collective judgment of an entire town stirred something in him he thought had died along with his family. He crossed the street, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The crowd parted for him instinctively. Gideon Nash was not a man you blocked. He stood over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, and though he was known as quiet and even-tempered, there was something in his eyes that warned people not to push him too far. "Preacher," Gideon said, nodding respectfully but firmly. "Maybe we should let the lady speak for herself before we decide her fate." Thornton's face grew redder. "This is a matter of morality, Mr. Nash. Unless you wish to associate yourself with her kind, I suggest you step aside." "Her kind," Gideon repeated, his voice dropping lower. "You mean the kind who's tired, scared, and looking for help. Seems to me that's exactly the kind of person Jesus himself would have welcomed." A few gasps rippled through the crowd at such bold talk directed at the preacher. Thornton's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. The woman looked at Gideon with wide eyes the color of warm honey. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition perhaps, or simply the desperate gratitude of one human being for another showing basic decency. "What is your name?" Gideon asked her gently, turning his back on the preacher entirely. "Olivia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Olivia Zimmerman." "Miss Zimmerman," Gideon said, though he noticed she wore no ring and wondered if she had ever been a missus at all. "Do you have anywhere to go?" "Anyone expecting you?" She shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I have no one. I hoped the church might take me in until I could figure out what to do. I can work. I am strong. I just need a chance. This is outrageous, Preacher Thornton interjected. Mr. Nash, if you involve yourself with this woman, you will be condoning her sin. The good people of this town will remember that. Gideon looked around at the faces surrounding them. He saw judgment, yes, but he also saw something else. Fear. These people were afraid of stepping outside the lines drawn for them by men like Thornton. They were afraid of being different, of being cast out themselves. He had stopped caring about such things the day he buried his parents. When you lost everything that mattered, the opinions of others became remarkably insignificant. I have a ranch, Gideon said, looking back at Olivia. It is not much, but there is a spare room. You could stay there, earn your keep helping with cooking and mending and such. It would be honest work and no one would bother you. You cannot be serious, Thornton sputtered. I am completely serious, Gideon replied. He extended his hand to Olivia. What do you say, Miss Zimmerman? Would you accept my offer? Olivia stared at his outstretched hand as if it were the most precious thing she had ever seen. Then she reached out and took it, her fingers small and cold in his calloused palm. Yes, she said. Thank you. You are very kind. Kindness has nothing to do with it, Gideon said, though that was not entirely true. It is just the right thing to do. He led her to his horse, helped her up into the saddle despite the scandalized whispers that followed them, and then climbed up behind her. As they rode out of town, Gideon felt the weight of every stare, heard the hiss of every whispered condemnation. But he also felt something else, the warmth of another person leaning against him, trusting him. It had been so long since anyone had needed him that he had forgotten what it felt like. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour. Neither of them spoke much at first, but gradually, as the town disappeared behind them and the open landscape stretched out before them, Olivia began to relax. She told him, in halting sentences, about how she had come from Missouri, how the man who had promised to marry her had abandoned her when he learned of her condition, how she had used the last of her money to travel west in hopes of finding work and a new start. I am not a bad person, she said, her voice fierce despite its softness. I loved him. I thought he loved me. I thought we would be married. I know what people think, but I am not what they say. I do not need to know your story, Gideon said. You do not owe me explanations. But I want you to know, Olivia insisted. You have been so kind, I do not want you to think poorly of me. I think you are brave, Gideon said simply. Coming all this way alone, facing down that preacher, that takes courage. Olivia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What will people say about you, taking me in like this? Let them say what they want. I stopped listening a long time ago. The ranch, when they reached it, was modest but well kept. A single-story wooden house with a porch, a barn, a corral with a dozen horses, and vast stretches of grazing land dotted with cattle. It was beautiful in its simplicity, and Olivia felt something in her chest loosen for the first time in months. Gideon helped her down from the horse and showed her inside. The house was clean but sparse, clearly the home of a man who lived alone and saw no need for decoration. There were 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, and a small kitchen. He led her to the spare room, which contained a simple bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the hills. This will be yours, he said. You can settle in, rest. I will make some supper later. No, Olivia said quickly. You have done enough. Let me cook, please. I need to feel useful. Gideon studied her face, saw the desperate need in her eyes to prove her worth, and nodded. All right, but only if you are feeling up to it. I am fine, she assured him. Truly. That first evening set the pattern for the days that followed. Olivia proved to be an excellent cook and a tireless worker despite her condition. She woke early each morning, prepared breakfast, tidied the house, mended clothes, and insisted on helping with whatever tasks Gideon would allow. He, in turn, tried not to let her overwork herself, conscious always of the child she carried. They developed an easy routine, a companionable rhythm that felt natural despite the strangeness of their situation. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the California hills, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence. 3 weeks after Olivia arrived, Gideon had to ride into town for supplies. She offered to come with him, but he shook his head. "Better if I go alone," he said. No need to give folks more reason to gossip. But when he returned that evening, his jaw was tight and his eyes stormy. Olivia, who had learned to read his moods in their short time together, knew immediately that something had happened. "What is it?" she asked as he unpacked the supplies with more force than necessary. "Nothing," he said tersely. "Gideon," he stopped, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "People are talking, saying things, about you, about me, about what they think is happening out here." Olivia felt her stomach drop. "What kind of things? Does it matter?" He turned to face her, his expression fierce. "They are wrong, and I do not care what they think. But I care what it does to you," Olivia said softly. "You have been so good to me. I cannot stand the thought of you suffering because of my presence." "You think I would send you away because of gossip?" Gideon stepped closer to her, his voice dropping. "Olivia, you have brought life to this place. Before you came, this ranch was just a place I existed. Now it feels like a home. Do you understand what I am saying?" Olivia looked up at him, her heart pounding. In the past 3 weeks, she had tried very hard not to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing inside her. Feelings that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the way Gideon's laugh sounded when she told him something amusing. The way his hands were so gentle despite their strength. The way he looked at her as if she were something precious rather than something shameful. "I think so," she whispered. "I do not expect anything from you," Gideon continued. "I want you to know that. You are safe here always, regardless of anything else. But I would be lying if I said you were just a hired hand to me. These past weeks, getting to know you, I have come to care for you. More than I should, probably, given the circumstances. The circumstances being that I am carrying another man's child," Olivia said, her voice catching. "The circumstances being that you have been through hell and deserve time to heal without some lonely cowboy complicating things by confessing feelings you might not want to hear." Olivia reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the table. "What if I want to hear them?" Gideon's eyes searched her face. "Olivia, I care for you too," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I have tried not to. I told myself it was too soon, that I was being foolish, that you were just being kind. But every day I find myself watching for you, listening for your voice, hoping for any excuse to be near you. When you are gone, the world feels emptier. When you are here, everything seems possible." Gideon turned his hand over so their palms pressed together. "I want to do this right. I want to court you properly if you will let me. I know the situation is complicated, but I do not care about any of that. I care about you." "How can you want me?" Olivia asked, tears streaming down her face now. "I am ruined in the eyes of everyone. I am carrying another man's child. I have nothing to offer you." "You have everything to offer me," Gideon said fiercely. He raised his other hand to cup her face, his thumb wiping away her tears. "You are brave and strong and kind. You make me laugh. You make this house feel warm. You make me want to be a better man. And as for the child, if you will have me, I will raise that baby as my own. It will be my privilege to be a father to your child." "You mean that?" Olivia breathed, seeing the truth of it in his eyes. "I have never meant anything more in my life." Olivia did not think about what was proper or what people would say. She simply rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and affection and hope into that single gesture. Gideon's arms came around her carefully, holding her as if she were made of glass, and kissed her back with a tenderness that made her soul ache. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "We will do this together," he promised. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." "Together," Olivia repeated, and for the first time since her world had fallen apart, she believed that everything might actually be all right. The next few months passed in a haze of contentment and growing love. As Olivia's belly swelled with the advancing pregnancy, Gideon became increasingly protective and attentive. He built a cradle by hand, carving careful designs into the wood during the evenings while Olivia sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They talked about everything and nothing. Olivia learned about Gideon's childhood, about his parents who had instilled in him a strong sense of justice and compassion, about the dreams he had for the ranch. Gideon learned about Olivia's love of books, her quick wit, her fierce loyalty to those she cared about. In September, Gideon rode into town and returned with the local justice of the peace, a grizzled old man named Harold Morton who had known Gideon's parents and had little patience for the judgment of others. "You are sure about this, son?" Morton asked, as he prepared the marriage certificate. "I have never been more sure of anything," Gideon replied, looking at Olivia with such love that she felt her eyes well up again. They were married on the porch at sunset, with only Morton and his wife as witnesses. Olivia wore a simple blue dress that Gideon had bought for her in town, and she held a bouquet of wildflowers that Gideon had picked that morning. When Morton pronounced them husband and wife, Gideon kissed her with such sweetness that Mrs. Morton dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. "You are a good man, Gideon Nash," Morton said as they shared a celebratory meal afterwards. "Your parents would be proud of the man you have become." "I hope so," Gideon said, but his eyes were on Olivia, and she knew that her opinion was the only one that truly mattered to him. That night, as they lay together in the bed that was now theirs to share, Olivia traced the line of Gideon's jaw with her fingertips. "Are you happy?" she asked softly. "Happier than I have any right to be," he replied. "You have given me everything, Olivia, a purpose, a family, a reason to look forward to tomorrow. You saved me," she whispered. "When everyone else turned away, you reached out your hand. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that moment." "Do not be grateful," Gideon said, pulling her closer. "Be happy, be loved. That is all I want." "I can do that," Olivia said, and kissed him again, sealing the promise between them. In late October, as the leaves were turning gold and the air grew crisp, Olivia's labor began. Gideon rode hard to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen who lived on a neighboring ranch. The labor was long and difficult, and Gideon paced the main room like a caged animal, flinching at every cry that came from the bedroom. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry pierced the air. Gideon froze, his heart hammering. Mrs. Chen emerged a few minutes later, a tired smile on her face. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is asking for you." Gideon rushed into the bedroom. Olivia lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, but her face was radiant as she held a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up as he entered, and her smile could have lit the entire valley. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Gideon approached slowly, almost reverently. When he looked down at the baby's small, scrunched face, he felt something in his chest crack wide open. This tiny person, this perfect little human, was his to protect and love and raise. "He is beautiful," Gideon whispered. "Would you like to hold him?" Olivia asked. With trembling hands, Gideon took the baby from her, cradling him awkwardly at first and then with growing confidence. The baby's eyes opened briefly, dark and unfocused, and Gideon felt a surge of fierce love unlike anything he had ever experienced. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your father. I am going to take care of you always. That is a promise." Olivia watched them through tears of joy. What should we name him? They had discussed names before, but suddenly none of them seemed right. Gideon thought of his own father, a man of integrity and strength. "What about Gabriel?" he suggested. "Gabriel Nash." "Gabriel," Olivia repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that is perfect, Mrs. Chen stayed for a few days to help Olivia recover, and during that time, Gideon learned the basics of caring for an infant. He changed diapers, walked the floor when Gabriel cried, and marveled at every tiny yawn and stretch. Watching him, Olivia fell even more deeply in love with her husband, if such a thing were possible. When Mrs. Chen finally left, assuring them that both mother and baby were healthy and strong, Gideon and Olivia settled into their new reality as parents. The sleepless nights and endless feedings were exhausting, but they faced them together, taking turns so the other could rest, working as a seamless team. One evening, as Gideon sat in the rocking chair he had built, holding a sleeping Gabriel against his chest, Olivia stood in the doorway watching them. The lamplight cast a warm glow over the scene, and she wished she could capture this moment forever. "What are you thinking about?" Gideon asked softly, noticing her. "How much I love you both," Olivia said. "How different my life could have been if you had not stepped in that day in town. I think about it sometimes and it terrifies me." "Do not think about it," Gideon said. "That is not the life you are living. This is your life, here with us, safe and loved." Olivia crossed the room and perched on the arm of the rocking chair, leaning her head against Gideon's shoulder. Together they looked down at Gabriel's peaceful face. "He is so lucky to have you as his father," Olivia whispered. "I am the lucky one," Gideon replied. "Both of you have given me more than I ever dreamed of having." Winter came to the California hills, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The ranch work continued, though Gideon tried to stay close to the house as much as possible, not wanting to leave Olivia and Gabriel alone for long. They created a warm cocoon of domesticity, the three of them against the world. In December, Gideon had to make a trip to Angel's Camp for supplies. He debated whether to ask Olivia and Gabriel to come with him, but the weather was bitterly cold and he did not want to expose the baby to it. "I will be fine here," Olivia assured him. "We will stay warm by the fire. Go, get what we need and come home safely." The town was decorated for Christmas when Gideon arrived, green boughs and red ribbons adorning storefronts. He completed his errands quickly, eager to return home, but as he was loading the wagon, he heard a familiar voice. "Mr. Nash." He turned to find Preacher Thornton standing behind him, looking older than he had just a few months ago. The man's expression was difficult to read. "Preacher," Gideon said neutrally. "I heard you married her," Thornton said. "The woman I turned away." "I did. Her name is Olivia and she is my wife." Thornton was quiet for a moment. "And the child, our son Gabriel, he is healthy and perfect." "Your son," Thornton repeated, "though he is not of your blood." "He is mine in every way that matters," Gideon said firmly. "Is there something you wanted, Preacher?" Thornton shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to say that perhaps I was hasty that day. Perhaps I should have shown more Christian charity." "Perhaps you should have," Gideon agreed, his voice hard. "But you did not, and that showed me everything I needed to know about the kind of man you are. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a family waiting for me at home." He climbed into the wagon and snapped the reins, leaving the preacher standing in the street. As he drove out of town, Gideon felt no satisfaction in the encounter, only a deep gratitude that Olivia had ended up with him rather than at the mercy of people like Thornton. When he arrived home, Olivia met him at the door with Gabriel in her arms, and the warmth of their welcome chased away the lingering chill of the confrontation. "How was town?" Olivia asked as he unloaded supplies. "Cold," Gideon said, "but I saw the preacher." Olivia stiffened. "What did he want? To apologize, I think, or something close to it. I did not give him much opportunity." "Good," Olivia said fiercely. "He does not deserve your forgiveness." Gideon smiled and kissed her forehead. "I do not care enough about him to hold a grudge. I only care about us, about this." He gestured around the warm house, at Gabriel sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms. "This is all that matters." Christmas that year was simple but joyful. Gideon cut down a small pine tree and set it up in the main room, and Olivia decorated it with ribbons and small ornaments she had crafted from paper and cloth. They roasted a chicken for dinner and exchanged small gifts. Gideon had carved a small wooden horse for Gabriel, who was still too young to appreciate it but would someday. Olivia had sewn Gideon a new shirt, every stitch a labor of love. But the greatest gift was simply being together, the three of them cocooned in warmth and love while snow fell softly outside. As the new year of 1879 dawned, Gideon and Olivia looked forward with hope and excitement. Gabriel was growing quickly, becoming more alert and responsive with each passing week. His first smile, when it came in February, was directed at Gideon, who had been making silly faces while Olivia prepared breakfast. The sight of that toothless grin made Gideon's eyes well up, and he scooped the baby into his arms, spinning him around gently while Olivia laughed. Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle produced healthy calves, the horses foaled, and the land burst into bloom. Olivia, who had been confined mostly to the house during the winter, began venturing out more, helping Gideon with small tasks when she could. Gabriel strapped to her back in a sling she had fashioned. One warm April afternoon, as they worked together to repair a section of fence, Olivia paused and looked around at the rolling hills, the clear blue sky, the ranch that had become her home. "I never imagined I could be this happy," she said softly. Gideon set down his tools and came to stand beside her. "Neither did I. Before you came, I was just going through the motions of living. You gave me a reason to truly live." "We gave each other that," Olivia said. She turned to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "You know what occurred to me the other day? Gabriel will grow up never knowing anything but love. He will never feel abandoned or unwanted. He will have a father who chose him, who loves him completely. That is a precious gift, Gideon. He will also have a mother who is stronger than anyone I have ever met," Gideon replied. "You are amazing, Olivia. The way you faced down that town, the way you have built this life with me, the way you love our son. I am in awe of you every single day." Olivia kissed him, slow and deep, pouring all her love into the gesture. Gabriel, as if sensing the moment, let out a happy gurgle from his sling, making them both laugh. "Our son has impeccable timing," Gideon said. "He learned from the best," Olivia replied, and they returned to their work, hands occasionally brushing, exchanging smiles that spoke of shared joy and deep contentment. In May, Harold Morton and his wife came to visit, bringing news from town. They had become unlikely allies, the older couple having taken it upon themselves to quietly counter some of the gossip about Gideon and Olivia. "People are starting to come around," Mrs. Morton said as they sat on the porch, watching Gabriel play with wooden blocks on a blanket. "Seeing how happy you both are, how well Gideon has taken to fatherhood, It is hard to maintain judgment in the face of obvious love. I do not care if they come around or not, Gideon said, though his tone was less harsh than it might have been months ago. Their opinions mean nothing to me. Perhaps not, Morton said, but Olivia might appreciate being able to come into town without facing hostility, and Gabriel will need to go to school someday. Olivia, who had been quiet, spoke up. I would like to be able to go to church again. Not Preacher Thornton's church, but somewhere we could worship as a family. I miss that. Gideon reached over and took her hand. Then we will find a place. Maybe we will drive to the next town over. I heard they have a younger minister there, someone more open-minded. That would be nice, Olivia said, squeezing his hand gratefully. As summer arrived, bringing long, hot days, the ranch prospered. Gideon hired a couple of hands to help with the increased work, young men from the area who needed employment. They quickly learned that Mrs. Nash was to be treated with utmost respect, not because she was fragile, but because Gideon would tolerate nothing less. Olivia bloomed in the warm weather, her health and strength fully restored from the pregnancy. She took over the vegetable garden, coaxing remarkable bounty from the California soil, and began selling excess produce and eggs in town. The money she earned was hers to keep, Gideon insisted, though she always tried to contribute it to the household funds. You work as hard as I do, Gideon would argue. You deserve to have something of your own. Everything I have is already my own because you share it with me, Olivia would counter. But if it makes you happy, I will save it for something special. Gabriel celebrated his first birthday in October with a small party. The Mortons came, as did the ranch hands and Mrs. Chen. It was a modest gathering, but filled with warmth and laughter. Gabriel, now walking with wobbly determination, delighted in the attention, and the cake Olivia had baked specially for the occasion. As Gideon watched his wife and son surrounded by friends, he felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened him. He had learned young that life could take away everything you loved in an instant. But he had also learned through Olivia that life could give unexpected blessings just as quickly. That night, after Gabriel was asleep and the guests had departed, Gideon and Olivia sat together on the porch swing he had installed that summer. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. I have been thinking, Olivia said, nestled against Gideon's side. Gabriel should have siblings. I want him to grow up with brothers and sisters to never feel alone. You want more children? Gideon asked, his heart lifting. I want your children, Olivia clarified. Gabriel is ours, but I want to give you babies that have your eyes, your smile. I want to create a whole family with you. Gideon turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. You have already given me more than I ever dreamed of. But yes, I would love nothing more than to have more children with you, to fill this ranch with life and love and noise. Then let us start trying, Olivia said, her eyes sparkling with mischief and love. Right now? Gideon asked, his voice dropping lower. Well, perhaps after we go inside, Olivia said, laughing. I am not that bold. Gideon scooped her up in his arms, making her squeal in surprise, and carried her into the house, both of them laughing like young lovers, which in many ways they still were. By the following spring of 1880, Olivia was pregnant again. This time, there was no fear or uncertainty, only joy and anticipation. Gideon was even more protective than he had been during her first pregnancy, constantly worrying that she was doing too much. I am not made of glass, Olivia would remind him gently. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Yes, but they were not my wife having my baby, Gideon would counter, and Olivia would soften, touched by his fierce protectiveness. Gabriel, now an energetic toddler, seemed to sense that something was different. He would pat Olivia's growing belly gently and say "baby" with great seriousness, making both his parents laugh. "He is going to be a wonderful big brother," Olivia said. "He learned from the best," Gideon replied. "You have given him such a strong foundation of love. He will share that with his sibling." In August, on a hot afternoon when the cicadas sang loudly in the trees, Olivia went into labor. This time, Gideon was calmer, though no less concerned. Mrs. Chen arrived quickly, and Gideon took Gabriel outside to wait, playing with him in the yard to distract them both. The labor was shorter than the first, and by evening, another baby's cry filled the air. Gideon, holding Gabriel's hand, waited anxiously for Mrs. Chen to emerge. "Another boy," she announced with a smile, "and he is perfect." Gideon felt tears spring to his eyes. A son. His son by blood this time, though it made no difference in how he loved Gabriel. Inside, Olivia looked tired but radiant, cradling a red-faced infant who looked remarkably like Gideon. "Come see your brother," Gideon said to Gabriel, lifting him up so he could see the baby. Gabriel peered at the tiny face with great interest. "Baby," he declared, then looked at Gideon seriously. "My baby." "Yes," Gideon said, his voice choked with emotion. "Your baby brother. We need to take care of him together." They named him George, after Gideon's father, and he quickly proved to have his father's calm temperament and his mother's expressive eyes. Gabriel took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help when the baby cried and bringing him toys he thought he might like. Watching her two sons together, Olivia often found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. Just 2 years ago, she had been alone and desperate, facing condemnation and rejection. Now she had a husband who loved her deeply, 2 beautiful sons, and a home filled with warmth and laughter. One evening, as Gideon rocked George to sleep while Gabriel dozed on Olivia's lap, she voiced these thoughts aloud. "Sometimes I am afraid to be this happy," she admitted, "like something will come and take it all away." "Nothing is going to take this away," Gideon said firmly. "We have built this together, you and I. We have created something strong and lasting. No one can take that from us." "Promise me," Olivia said, her voice small. "Promise me you will always be here." "I promise," Gideon said, and though he knew such promises were beyond anyone's control, he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I will always fight to come home to you and our boys. Always." As the years passed, the Nash Ranch became known throughout the county as a place of prosperity and happiness. Gideon expanded the cattle operation, and Olivia's garden and egg business grew steadily. They added onto the house, creating more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. In 1882, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had Olivia's dark hair and Gideon's green eyes, and both her brothers were immediately besotted with her. Gabriel, now 4, declared himself her protector, while George, at 2, simply liked to stare at her in fascination. "Our family is complete," Olivia said as she recovered from the birth, holding Grace while surrounded by her boys. "It is perfect," Gideon agreed. 3 beautiful children and the most amazing woman in the world as my wife. What more could any man want? But life had one more surprise in store. In 1884, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was 30 years old and feeling every bit of it. The pregnancy was harder than the others, and Gideon worried constantly. "This is the last one," he declared. "I cannot go through this worry again." "We will see what God decides," Olivia said with a tired smile. In February of 1885, she gave birth to twin boys, Samuel and Simon. The labor was difficult, and for a few terrifying hours, Gideon feared he might lose her. But Olivia, with the same strength she had shown that day in Angel's Camp so many years ago, fought through and survived. When Gideon finally was allowed into the bedroom and saw Olivia pale but smiling, holding two tiny infants, he broke down completely. He knelt by the bed, burying his face against her side, his shoulders shaking with sobs of relief and joy. "I am all right," Olivia whispered, running her fingers through his hair. "We are all right. I cannot lose you," Gideon choked out. "You are everything to me, everything." "You are not going to lose me," Olivia assured him. "I am too stubborn to go anywhere. We have 5 children to raise together, remember? 5 children." It seemed impossible that they had created such a large family, but looking around the house over the following weeks, Gideon could not imagine it any other way. Gabriel, now 7, had become a serious and responsible young man who helped with his younger siblings constantly. George, at 4, was the family comedian, always making everyone laugh. Grace, at 2, was a little mother to her baby brothers. And Samuel and Simon, identical in every way, were content as long as they were near each other. The house was chaos most days, filled with noise and laughter and occasional tears. But it was also filled with love, so much love that sometimes Gideon had to step outside just to catch his breath from the enormity of it all. One summer evening in 1886, after the children were all finally asleep, Gideon and Olivia sat on the porch as they had done countless times over the years. Olivia, now 32, had threads of silver in her dark hair, and Gideon, at 36, had permanent smile lines around his eyes. "Do you ever think about that day in town?" Olivia asked suddenly. "The day the preacher rejected me." "Sometimes," Gideon admitted. "Why, I think about it often," Olivia said. "I think about how terrified I was, how alone I felt. And then I think about you stepping forward, offering me your hand. You saved my life that day, Gideon, not just physically, but in every way that matters. You saved my soul." "You saved mine too," Gideon replied. "I was just existing before you came, going through the motions. You taught me how to truly live, how to love, how to be happy. You were not my burden, Olivia. You were my blessing, the greatest blessing I could have ever received." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "I love you so much, more than words could ever express." "I love you too," Gideon said, pulling her close. "And I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the California hills, the same hills they had watched together for 8 years now. Inside, their 5 children slept peacefully, safe and loved. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and well-tended. They had built a good life together, a life rooted in love and respect and unwavering commitment. "What do you think our children will remember most about growing up here?" Olivia asked. Gideon thought about it. "I think they will remember that they were loved, that no matter what challenges they faced, they always had a home to return to, parents who believed in them. I think they will remember the sound of laughter, the warmth of family dinners, the security of knowing they belonged." "Gabriel will remember that you chose him," Olivia said softly. "That you loved him as your own from the very beginning. That is a gift beyond measure." "He is my son," Gideon said simply. "Just as much as George and the others. There is no difference in my heart." "I know," Olivia said. "That is what makes you such an extraordinary man." As the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of betrayal, the fear of facing the world alone, the desperate hope that had led her to Angel's Camp. And then Gideon, stepping out of the crowd, offering kindness when everyone else offered judgment. She thought about how easily things could have gone differently. If Gideon had not been in town that day, if he had not had the courage to stand up to the preacher. If he had not offered her a place to stay, her life would have been so different, probably much shorter and infinitely sadder. But he had been there. He had reached out his hand, and in doing so, he had changed both their lives forever. "What are you thinking about?" Gideon asked, sensing the depth of her contemplation. "About how much I love our life," Olivia replied. "About how grateful I am for every single day. About how I want to hold on to these moments forever." "Then let us make the most of every day we have," Gideon said. "Let us fill our children's lives with so much love and joy that they carry it with them always. Let us continue to build this life together, one day at a time." "Yes," Olivia agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "One day at a time for all the days we have." The years continued to pass in a blur of activity and growth. Gabriel grew into a young man who inherited his father's sense of justice and his mother's compassionate heart. He decided he wanted to be a teacher, wanting to help other children the way his parents had always helped him. Gideon and Olivia supported this dream wholeheartedly, proud of the man he was becoming. George proved to have a gift with animals, particularly horses. He spent hours in the barn, training and caring for the ranch's horses with a patience and skill that amazed everyone. Gideon began teaching him the business side of the ranch, preparing him to take over someday if he wanted. Grace, as she grew, revealed herself to be a talented artist. She drew and painted everything around her, capturing the beauty of the ranch and her family in ways that took Olivia's breath away. They encouraged this talent, buying her proper supplies and praising every creation. Samuel and Simon remained inseparable as they grew. They developed their own language, finishing each other's sentences and seemingly reading each other's minds. They were mischievous but kind-hearted, always getting into minor trouble but never anything serious. In 1892, when Gabriel turned 18, he left for Teachers College in San Francisco. It was the first time the family had been separated, and everyone felt the loss keenly. But they were also proud of him for pursuing his dreams. "This is what we wanted," Olivia said through tears as they watched his stage pull away. "For our children to grow up strong and confident enough to chase their dreams." "I know," Gideon said, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "But that does not make it easier." Gabriel came home every few months, bringing stories of city life and his studies. The younger children hung on his every word, and Gideon and Olivia marveled at the articulate, confident young man he had become. One evening during one of his visits home, Gabriel asked to speak with his parents privately. They sat on the porch, the same porch where so many important conversations had taken place over the years. "I want you both to know something," Gabriel said seriously. "I know my birth father abandoned us. I know he left before I was even born. And I know that you, Dad, chose to love me anyway. To raise me as your own." "Gabriel," Gideon started, but Gabriel held up his hand. "Let me finish. I need you to know that I have never, not for one single day of my life, felt like anything other than your son. You have been my father in every way that matters. You taught me right from wrong, you supported my dreams, you showed me what it means to be a good man. And Mom, you have been the strongest, most loving person I could have ever hoped to have as a mother. You both gave me a family, a home, a life filled with love. I am who I am because of you. And I am so grateful." Olivia was crying openly now, and Gideon's face was tight with emotion. "You have always been my son," Gideon said, his voice rough. "From the moment I saw you as a baby, you were mine. I am so proud of the man you have become, Gabriel, so incredibly proud." "We both are," Olivia added, reaching for Gabriel's hand. "You are our miracle, our first blessing." Gabriel smiled, his own eyes wet. "I just wanted you to know. I am writing a paper for one of my classes about family, and it made me realize I needed to tell you how I feel. How much you both mean to me." That night, after Gabriel had gone to bed, Gideon and Olivia stayed up talking about how quickly time had passed. It seemed like just yesterday that Gabriel was a tiny baby in Olivia's arms, and now he was a grown man, preparing to start his own teaching career. "We have done well," Olivia said. "All our children are growing up strong and kind. We should be proud." "I am proud," Gideon agreed. "Mostly I am grateful. Grateful for you, for them, for this life we have built." "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked. "Taking me in that day? Taking on all the responsibility and trouble I brought with me?" Gideon looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "Regret it? Olivia, that was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children are my entire world. I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." Olivia kissed him, still feeling the flutter in her stomach that she had felt since their first kiss. "I love you, Gideon Nash, with everything I am. And I love you, Olivia Nash, always and forever." As they grew older, Gideon and Olivia watched their children mature and begin making their own marks on the world. George took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, proving himself a capable and innovative manager. Grace began selling her paintings, gaining recognition throughout California for her talent. Samuel and Simon, now teenagers, were considering their options, talking about perhaps starting their own ranch together someday. And Gabriel, their firstborn, returned home after finishing his studies to take a teaching position in Angel's Camp. The town had changed significantly over the years, becoming more progressive and accepting. Gabriel's first class included children of all backgrounds, and he treated each one with the same compassion and respect his parents had shown him. On a crisp autumn day in 1895, Gabriel brought home a young woman named Sarah, a fellow teacher he had been courting. She was sweet and intelligent, and it was clear Gabriel was deeply in love with her. Watching them together, seeing the way Gabriel looked at Sarah with such devotion, reminded Gideon and Olivia of themselves all those years ago. "You see yourself in him?" Olivia asked Gideon quietly as they watched Gabriel and Sarah walk together through the garden. "I see us," Gideon replied. "The way we were, the way we still are." Gabriel and Sarah were married the following spring in a ceremony held at the ranch. The entire county seemed to turn out for the celebration, the Nash family having become beloved and respected over the years. Even Preacher Thornton, now elderly and considerably humbled, attended and offered his congratulations. "You have a fine family, Mr. Nash," he said to Gideon. "You have done well." Gideon accepted the compliment with grace but did not elaborate. Some wounds, though healed, left scars that remained sensitive. As Gideon danced with Olivia at the reception, both of them now in their late 40s, he marveled at how full his life had become. They were surrounded by children, soon-to-be grandchildren, friends, community. The lonely cowboy he had once been seemed like a different person entirely. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked, following his gaze around the celebration. "That you were right," Gideon said. "That day when the preacher called you a woman of sin, he was wrong about everything. You were not a curse or a burden. You were a blessing, the greatest blessing, and you have brought nothing but good into my life and the lives of everyone you have touched." Olivia's eyes glistened with tears. "We saved each other, you and I. We built this beautiful life together from nothing but faith and love. And we are not done yet," Gideon said, spinning her around. "We still have so many years ahead of us, so much more life to live." "Then let us live it all," Olivia said. "Every precious moment." As the sun set over the California hills that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, Gideon and Olivia stood together watching their family celebrate. Gabriel and Sarah, beginning their new life together. George, discussing ranch business with potential buyers for some of their horses. Grace, sketching the scene to capture it forever. Samuel and Simon, charming everyone with their wit and enthusiasm. This was what they had built. Not just a ranch or a house, but a legacy of love. A testament to the power of choosing compassion over judgment, of reaching out a hand instead of turning away. Olivia thought back to that terrified young woman standing alone in the street, facing condemnation and rejection. She wished she could tell that woman that everything would be all right. That the kind stranger stepping forward would become her husband, her partner, her greatest love. That the baby she carried would grow up surrounded by siblings and parents who adored him. That her life would be filled with more joy than she ever imagined possible. But that woman was gone, transformed into this version of herself. Older, wiser, infinitely happier, still herself at the core, but expanded and enriched by love and family and the passage of time. "Penny for your thoughts," Gideon murmured, his arm around her waist. "I was just thinking about how far we have come," Olivia replied. "About that day in town when you changed my life." "You changed mine too," Gideon reminded her. "We changed each other's. That is what love does. It transforms us into better versions of ourselves." "Then I like who we have become," Olivia said, leaning into him. "So do I," Gideon agreed. "So do I." The years that followed were quieter but no less fulfilling. Gabriel and Sarah had 3 children, giving Gideon and Olivia their first grandchildren. George married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring county, and they had 2 sons. Grace eventually married a kind art dealer from San Francisco who appreciated her talent and supported her career. And Samuel and Simon did indeed start their own ranch together, remaining bachelors who were content with their partnership and the life they had built. Gideon and Olivia, now in their 60s, slowed down but never stopped. They still sat on their porch every evening, still held hands like young lovers, still looked at each other with the same depth of feeling they had always shared. One evening in the summer of 1908, 30 years after they had first met, they sat together watching the sunset. Gideon's hair was now completely silver, and Olivia's face bore the lines of a life well lived. But their love remained as strong as ever, perhaps even stronger for having weathered the tests of time. "You remember the first sunset we watched together from this porch?" Olivia asked. "I remember every sunset we have watched together," Gideon replied. "But yes, I especially remember that first one. You were so nervous, so uncertain about what the future would hold. And you were so kind, so patient with me," Olivia recalled. "You gave me time to heal, to learn to trust again." "You were worth waiting for," Gideon said simply. "You have always been worth everything." Olivia took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "I want you to know that I have been happy. Every single day, even the hard ones, I have been grateful to be living this life with you." "As have I," Gideon said, squeezing her hand gently. "You have been my partner in everything, Olivia, my best friend, my love, my life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in brilliant colors one more time. Around them, the ranch they had built together hummed with life. Their children and grandchildren visited regularly, filling the house with noise and laughter. The land prospered under George's management. Their legacy was secure, but more than any material success, they had created something intangible but invaluable. A family rooted in love and acceptance. A home where anyone could find sanctuary. A testament to the power of choosing kindness over judgment. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Gideon helped Olivia to her feet, and they made their way inside together, still hand in hand. Tomorrow would bring new joys and perhaps new challenges. But they would face it together, as they had faced everything for the past 30 years, in their bedroom, decorated with Grace's paintings and photographs of their growing family. They prepared for sleep with the comfortable routine of longtime partners. As they lay together in the darkness, Olivia's head on Gideon's shoulder as it had been countless nights before, she whispered the words she still needed to say. "Thank you for choosing me that day. Thank you for loving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you for letting me," Gideon whispered back. "Thank you for being brave enough to take my hand. Thank you for loving me back. Always," Olivia promised, "until my last breath and beyond." "Always," Gideon echoed. They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The lonely cowboy and the rejected woman had become so much more than the roles they had been cast in that day in Angel's Camp. They had become partners, parents, grandparents, pillars of their community, and most importantly, each other's greatest blessing. Outside, the California night settled over the ranch like a benediction. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. The horses stirred in the barn. A light breeze rustled through the trees. And inside the house, Gideon and Olivia Nash slept peacefully, their story one of the most beautiful love stories the West had ever seen. Years later, when their great-grandchildren asked about how Grandma Olivia and Grandpa Gideon had met, the family would tell them the story. About the woman rejected by the preacher, about the cowboy who stepped forward when no one else would, about the family they had built together from nothing but faith and love. And the children would listen with wide eyes, learning the most important lesson their great-grandparents had to teach. That true love is not about perfection or circumstances. It is about choice, about choosing to see the best in someone, about choosing kindness over judgment, about choosing to reach out your hand and help someone up rather than walking away. That was the legacy Gideon and Olivia Nash left behind. Not just a prosperous ranch or successful children, but a lesson in what it means to truly love. To see past society's judgments to the person underneath. To build something beautiful from broken pieces. The ranch remained in the Nash family for generations, each successive generation adding their own chapters to the story. But the foundation remained the same, built on that single moment of compassion when a lonely cowboy took in a woman the preacher rejected. And she became, just as the story goes, his greatest blessing, just as he became hers. Two people who needed each other, who saved each other, who loved each other until the very end and beyond. Their graves, when the time eventually came, were placed side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones bore simple inscriptions with their names and dates, but also a shared phrase that said everything that needed to be said. Together always. And indeed they were, in memory, in legacy, in the family they created, and in the love story that would be told and retold for generations. A reminder that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as burdens, and that true love has the power to transform everything it touches. The end.